As the WNBA gears up for its first expansion draft since the arrival of the Las Vegas Aces, the stakes for every team have never been higher. The Golden State Valkyries, a new franchise set to debut in 2025, are preparing to build their roster by picking players from the existing WNBA teams. Each franchise has the opportunity to protect 6 players from being snatched up, with the rest left exposed to potential selection. This is where things went horribly wrong for the Indiana Fever, a franchise that was already struggling to find its footing. Just one day before the deadline to protect players, Indiana Fever's social media team made a colossal blunder by accidentally posting their protected player list online. Not only did they leak their plans for the expansion draft, but they also handed a cheat sheet to every rival team, including the Golden State Valkyries. This blunder wasn't just a minor slip-up, it was a disaster that put the Fever's credibility and their entire strategy under intense scrutiny. The leak of the protected player list would have been embarrassing enough, but the fallout goes much deeper. The Fever, who had recently experienced a glimmer of success with a playoff appearance, had a chance to build on that momentum and solidify themselves as a team to watch. Instead, they turned a pivotal moment for their franchise into a public relations nightmare. By prematurely posting their protected players list, they gave rival teams a clear view of their priorities and exposed a glaring lack of strategy and foresight. It's one thing to make a mistake, but it's another entirely to make that mistake in front of the entire WNBA world. The Fever had one job: to keep their plans under wraps until after the protection deadline. Instead, they handed their rivals an advantage and gave fans a front-row seat to their dysfunction. The situation has led many to question the competence of the Fever's front office and coaching staff. This is not a rookie mistake. This is a blunder on a grand scale that will be talked about for years. In a league as competitive as the WNBA, where every decision can have significant repercussions, the Fever's inability to execute even the most basic tasks is a massive red flag. Let's talk about the list itself. The Fever made the predictable decision to protect Caitlin Clark, the face of their franchise, and Aaliyah Boston, their cornerstone player and a walking double-double machine. Kelsey Mitchell, a prolific scorer, also made the cut as expected. These 3 players are the future of the franchise, and protecting them was a no-brainer. But then things start to get murky. Lexi Hull, though scrappy and improving, doesn't exactly scream untouchable. She adds depth to the team, but her skill set doesn't seem to justify a protected status over other, potentially more valuable players. It's not that Hull doesn't have potential, but there were other more obvious choices to secure. Then comes the real head-scratcher, Nalisa Smith. Smith has shown flashes of talent, but has been a highly inconsistent performer for the Fever. Her decision-making on the court has often been questionable, and her off-court drama has distracted from her basketball career. Smith has spent much of the season trending for tick-tick antics rather than her on-court performance, and yet the Fever chose to protect her over players who have shown more potential. Protecting her feels like a roll of the dice, hoping that the good version of Smith will show up more often than the bad. Worse still is the decision to protect Tammy Bentley, a veteran player who has been hampered by injuries and is increasingly seen as a liability rather than an asset. Bentley's best days are behind her, and while she provides a solid defensive presence and a veteran attitude, her health issues and lack of consistent production make her a questionable choice for protection. Protecting Bentley over younger, fresher talent like Grace Berger or Demiris Dantas seems like a waste of a protected slot. The real shock comes when you look at the players who didn't make the cut. Grace Berger, a young player with enormous potential, was left exposed. She has shown great promise as a backup for Caitlin Clark and could have developed into a key piece of the Fever's future. Instead, Indiana decided to throw her into the expansion draft mix, leaving her vulnerable to being picked up by the Golden State Valkyries. Similarly, Demiris Dantas, a versatile forward who can stretch the floor and provide much-needed depth, was also left unprotected. This decision reeks of short-term thinking. Dantas has the kind of skill set that could be invaluable to any team looking to build for the future, But instead of securing her as a potential asset, the Fever are letting her go. If the Valkyries pick her up, the Fever will look back at this moment as a huge missed opportunity. This is the kind of misstep that can't be ignored. Indiana is in a position where it needs to make smart, calculated decisions to build a championship contender, but instead they are gambling on players with questionable futures while letting go of those with real potential. If this is their idea of strategy, the Fever are in for a long season of regret. What makes this situation even more painful for the Fever is that their decision-making or lack thereof aligns almost perfectly with ESPN's predictions. The fact that a major sports network could predict Indiana's protected list with such accuracy suggests that the Fever's strategy is anything but inspired. If rival analysts can see the team's moves coming from a mile away, it's clear that the Fever have failed to shake things up and think outside the box. This makes their blunder even worse. If a sports network can predict your moves, it means that you're not being innovative or proactive. You're simply following the obvious path. But in a league as competitive as the WNBA, following the obvious path doesn't win championships. It leads to mediocrity. The aftermath of this leak has been swift and unforgiving. Fans are furious, analysts are picking apart every decision, and rival teams are likely laughing at the Fever's misfortune. The Golden State Valkyries, in particular, stand to benefit from this debacle. With a clear view of the Fever's priorities, they can target unprotected players like Berger and Dantas and instantly improve their roster. In one fell swoop, the Valkyries have been handed a major advantage, and the Fever have only themselves to blame. Some fans have suggested that the leak was not an accident, but a deliberate move to gauge public reaction. If that's the case, it's a wildly reckless strategy, one that could backfire in a big way. Using your fan base as a focus group for your mistakes is a bold, if not misguided, move. However, given the Fever's track record, it seems more likely that this was simply another in a long line of missteps by a franchise that has struggled to get things right. If the leak was intentional, it speaks to a deeper issue within the Fever's front office. It suggests that the team is so desperate for attention or validation that they are willing to risk alienating their fan base and undermining their own strategy. If this was an accident, however, it's just another reason to question the competence of the people running the show in Indiana. With the expansion draft set for December 6, 2024, the Fever have already lost a crucial battle, their credibility. Whether they manage to recover from this debacle remains to be seen, but their mistakes have already made them the laughingstock of the league. Fans are questioning the competence of the front office, rival teams are salivating at the prospect of picking up unprotected talent, and the Golden State Valkyries are likely rubbing their hands together in delight. As the Fever prepare for what could be a difficult season ahead, one thing is clear: their decision-making needs a serious overhaul. If this is the new energy they were promising for the future, the franchise is in trouble. Without a clear vision and a better understanding of how to build a successful team, the Fever's future looks uncertain at best. In the world of professional sports, where every decision matters, the Indiana Fever have just made a monumental mistake. How they recover from this misstep and whether they can rebuild their credibility remains to be seen. But for now, they've set the stage for a long, painful road ahead.